Every day I search in spite of me. Every day I search for what I cannot see. Every day I search for you. Every day I search for the truth. Just can't help falling in love with you. More with everything you do. Speak and the mountains tremble with fear. And at the sound of your voice, I know you are near, be near to me. Every day I long deep inside of me. Every day I long for what's plain to see. Every day I long to be with you. Every day I long for the truth. Just can't help falling in love with you. More with everything you do. Speak and the mountains tremble with fear. And at the sound of your voice, know you are near, be near to me. And the rain falls like tears, and most days I cry, but facing my fears, the truth I won't deny. Just can't help falling in love with you. Love with you. More than every little thing you do. Speak out of mountains, tremble with fear. And at the sound of your voice, know you are near. Just can't help falling in love with you. Love with you. More than every little thing you do. Speak out of mountains, tremble with fear. And at the sound of your voice, know you are near, be near to me.
Actually live.
Hello and welcome to Church Online with the Ecclesian House. I'm Pastor Bill and this is Pastor Nooms. And we hope everybody's having a great week and a great Mother's Day. Nooms,
Yes.
Did you call your mother today?
I did call my mother. I called my mother. I called my grandmother. We're going to see how long I can take those off. So,
Yes. Pastor Nooms is having a migraine this evening.
Yes, it is a migraine day. I woke up.
He's exercising his faith for it to go away, but also, you know, he's not being stupid. He's taking measures to relieve the pain at the same time.
James opened up the door and was like, because every light in this house is off. So, but because of the way the windows are and without actual good window covers, there's still light in every room in this house. But yes, I called my mother, I called my grandmother, called her mother.
Call Grandma Jew.
I said my grandmother.
Oh.
You didn't call Grandma Jew? Dum, dum, dum.
Yeah.
Heather forgot to call Grandma Jew.
Yeah, she was in the room yet.
I called my mother, and Roxanne texted her mother, and yeah. So my mom and I had a nice long FaceTime this morning. It was good. It wasn't just a phone call. It was like just a drawn out, conversation. It was nice.
That's good.
Good. So how's your week been?
Well, I got real sick last week, as we kind of talked about. So I ended up getting tested for COVID. It came back negative. My whole family.
Already?
Yeah, it came back.
That's quick.
That test, it was self-given, but they watch you and tell you okay, keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay, now spin that around. And I don't know which is worse, a self-given COVID test or the
Someone
flu,
shoving it up there for you.
where they do it real quick and it's in, they know where it's got to go when it comes out. But doing it yourself, you're slowly pushing something into right here in your eye.
Yeah.
And so you're because you're afraid of yourself. So you're slowly pushing this thing back and you can just feel it. And then when it came out, it had like a nice big thing from one of my sinus cavities in it as well. And I was like, I just gave that lady a huge booger. And my girls were like, ew. And then for the girls, they did it. They did it themselves. Like they would do the test, but the girls had to.
But you were like, oh, it's such a load off. Oh, man.
Yeah. And then my nose ran all day. And so I was still out of it. They gave me a steroid pack because they thought it might just be a sinus issue, which it probably was. And then this morning I woke up, just felt like yesterday was my last day of my steroids, so I think my steroids wore off and my body was like, ha ha, you don't actually feel better. And then the migraine came right after. So it's been an interesting week. I didn't work a couple of the days. I called in and just laid in bed and slept. So it was not a productive week. I got to get some stuff done next week because I've got some big projects coming up and I got to show some progress.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Where's my phone for Twitch?
Yeah, I was just getting onto the... I forgot to pull up the multi-chat earlier, so I was doing that. And it's in my great coffee cup.
This guy's one awesome dad. You see my bang?
No, I didn't see it. Unlike Michael Scott, I didn't have to buy my own coffee cup.
You didn't?
No, I was gifted this coffee cup, so...
That's good.
So there's that, So Monday, I went to the dentist because I was having those toothaches.
Yep.
And did the whole stop in the parking lot, call them to let them know I'm there. They brought out paperwork. I filled out the paperwork. I called them to let them know I was done with the paperwork. They came out and got the paperwork. And then I sat there until they called to let me know to come in for my dental procedure. And they did x-rays. And then he took a little look at them and he was like, well, I don't think there's anything I can do for that. I think we're going to have to pull them. So I got my top wisdom tooth and my bottom third from the back molar pulled because I already got the wisdom tooth and the back molar on the bottom pulled years ago. So all week I've been recuperating from having 2 teeth pulled.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been kind of a painful week and I haven't done any real driving. I mean, I've got the little old lady in Boyd that I take grocery shopping, and I did that this week, but that's it. That's the only time I actually left the house. Other than going to see the Blue Angels do a flyover. I made a point of taking the family to go see that. And we picked a spot in Montgomery Plaza where they came overhead and they started releasing the cloud stuff, and they did a loop around the medical district, and we saw the whole loop, and then they flew over top of us again, and then turned off the smoke because they had finished the loop. So they flew over top of where we were twice.
Nice. That's a good pick.
It was cool. I was glad they released the flight plan ahead of time so that I could pick a good spot to take my family to go see the Blue Angels. And they didn't do any tricks. They just did a flyover. But it was awesome enough, you know.
Oh yeah. Anytime you see the Blue Angels, or there's a couple, you know, each branch has their own version. The Blue Angels is just, you know, the most popular. Anytime you see any of those, they are phenomenal. I used to live near an Air Force base, and so they would have big flight shows every year, and it's phenomenal to see those types of people.
And they were flying in formation so close. It was like, ooh, I know they're further away than it seems like because I'm so far away. But even then, they're going so fast. They're so close.
They're barely social distancing.
Yeah. Make me nervous, man.
Wing to wing is a countable amount of feet. Wing to wing, typically.
Yeah. Man. All right. So this week in the podcast, we talked about the letter of the law of the Sabbath.
Yep.
Right? And we started with John chapter 5, verses 1 through 15. And I'm going to go ahead and read those so that we know where, you know, what we're talking about. John 5, not John 1. I turned to John 1 for some reason.
5:1, so you turned. And I'm also practicing for moving to Tennessee.
By drinking out of a mason jar. Yeah, so I've got coffee instead of Monsters because the dentist said all the teeth problems I've been having over the last year and 2 months is most likely from the acidic level of the energy drinks that I drink to keep myself awake while I'm driving.
I can see it.
So I made a new rule, you know, no energy drinks in the house anymore, and I'm starting to limit and phase out the energy drinks while I'm driving, but no more energy drinks within the house.
Well, you should,
you know.
You should definitely come get these sneaks, because their acidic level is much lower next time you're out in this side of town. I'm waiting on the last, if you wait till later this week, I should have the other flavors, so you can try all 6 flavors pretty close together. But the acidic level, I would assume, girls, have you felt the same? The acidic level is lower on the sneaks?
I don't taste acidic before.
Yeah. I can't. Everyone just looked at me like I was crazy.
John chapter 5, verses 1 through 15. After this, a Jewish festival took place, and Jesus, I'm reading from my actual hard copy, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. By the sheep gate in Jerusalem, there was a pool called Bethesda in Aramaic, which has 5 colonnades. Within these lay a large number of the disabled, blind, lame, and paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water, because an angel would go down into the pool from time to time and stir up the water. Then the first one who got in after the water was stirred up recovered from whatever ailment he had. One man was there who had been disabled for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and realized he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the disabled man answered, "I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming, someone goes down ahead of me." "Get up," Jesus told him. "Pick up your mat and walk." Instantly, the man got well, picked up his mat, and started to walk. Now that day was the Sabbath, and so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "This is the Sabbath. The law prohibits you from picking up your mat." He replied, "The man who made me well told me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" Who was this man who told you, pick up your mat and walk? They asked. But the man who was healed did not know who it was, because Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. After this, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Do not sin anymore, so that something worse doesn't happen to you." The man went and reported to the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. Right. So
one interesting thing before we get too far into it, the electronic version of the CSB that I have does not have verse 4.
correct. It doesn't have the second half of verse 3.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have verse 4.
Because it's only in certain texts.
Because, yes, only certain manuscripts that we found have the second half of verse 3 and verse 4.
But I find it interesting they didn't even denote it. It's just, like, I know in, like, the hard copy it's denoted, but in the digital,
yes, in the hard copy it's denoted.
It's just
so
gone.
I just jumped down to the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
And read it.
Okay.
Because they took the time to translate it.
Yeah.
And put it in the footnotes.
And KJV has it. It's just in there. It's just in line. They're like, this is important because without it, you don't know what's going on.
Right. At some point, somebody went back to the letter of John, the letters from this book of John, and thought, this is really important detail missing here that I'm going to add. And then when they used the manuscripts to translate the King James Version, it was there. And then later when we found older manuscripts, it wasn't there. Yeah. And so to preserve the purity of the text, the CSB leaves it out.
Yeah.
And then puts it in the footnotes.
I wish eSword denoted the footnotes better somewhere.
Right. And the eSword it probably doesn't, but in the iPad app, the CSB app for the iPad, it has the denotation.
Okay. Just kind of for anyone who might be, listening or looking and they're like, wait, why is there no verse 4? That's why.
And that's why. Yeah. Okay. So what I wrote in my notes is, I made a point to point out that these people were slaves to the laws of sin and death.
Yep.
So everything they did, everything they said, everything they saw, everything they thought was through that lens of being a slave to the laws of sin and death. And we call them the laws of sin and death because that's what Paul calls them in his writings in the New Testament. He calls them the laws of sin and the laws of death, the laws of sin and death. And so because they were slaves to the laws of sin and death, when they saw or heard of this man who'd been disabled for, what did it say, 38 years he's been disabled. Very publicly disabled. It's not like he's been chilling in his house. He's been on a mat in the public square, right? Asking for money. His family's taking care of him or his friends. But they're leaving him there and they're going off somewhere else. And then when the angel comes and stirs the water or whatever stirring the water, they believed it was an angel. And people are getting in the water and then they're getting healed. They're not there to take him into the water. And so but he's very publicly disabled. It's not like they needed him to prove that he'd been disabled. He went to these Jews and they knew, clearly they knew that he had been disabled because they looked at his mat and they recognized the mat as a part of his work or how he made money, how he survived, how he supported himself. So they knew he was disabled. That wasn't the question.
Nope.
And obviously they now see that he's healed. But through the lens of the laws of sin and death, it don't matter that he's now been healed.
No.
He's violated the law.
Yep.
And so it causes this ridiculous response to where instead of glorifying God, they have to demean the man and downplay the miracle to support their religiosity, their religious viewpoint of the world through these blinders of the law of sin and death. It's like disking. You know what disking is, right? You've heard of disking?
The horse thing?
No. It's where you take a couple of CDs and you put them on your glasses and you flip your face forward and they I'll show you.
You have CDs? How old are you?
I am, you know how old I am.
I know.
I'm as old as long as that man was disabled. That's how old I am.
Oh yeah, it is a new year.
Okay, so you take these things. I did it backwards, but like that. See?
We're halfway through it all.
So it's like this. So this is how they're looking at the miracle that God did right here.
Oh, yeah,
See?
I know what he's talking about.
Right here.
What?
That's how they're seeing the miracle. Blinders, man. They can't even see the miracle of God, and that's actually a Ron Luce curriculum, 4-week Ron Luce curriculum from an Acquire the Fire. And what's this other one? Ah, yes, this one is also a Ron Luce curriculum from an Acquire the Fire. But yes, I have CDs. I even tried to buy Kanye's new album on CD when it first came out, and they were like, well, you can download it digitally, but it's going to be 18 weeks before the CD comes out. And I was like, I guess I'll wait 18 weeks. I'd rather have the disc. I don't care about I don't like all this digital whatever.
You're old.
Yeah, Amazon's being sued right now because they sold digital copies, and then it came out that those people don't actually own those digital copies. They're stored on Amazon's vaults somewhere, and Amazon started pulling the products that people had bought and owned.
Oof.
And so now Amazon's being sued over it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's bound to happen. It's kind of like all the Voodoo from Walmart.
Yeah.
That one's still around, but there was a bunch that came out at the same time, and all of them have shut down. And like, they were digital copies included in like buying discs that I bought in the past, and then I started getting the emails of, hey, we're no longer having this, we're taking the servers down, and you're just like, yeah, it happens. And it happens in gaming all the time. I've got a lot of games because they were online games. One that Tina really liked for a long time. And it just, they took the servers down a couple years ago, and it's gone.
I had bought Fable for my Xbox 360. The first Fable, so I could go back and play through it. And then our Xbox 360 died. That copy's gone. That copy of that game is gone.
Well, it's actually attached to your live. But
it wasn't. It was downloaded into the thing, and my life has no record of it.
Ooh,
So.
oh, okay.
that's
That's odd. Not how it's supposed to work, but okay.
Xbox.
So
Okay,
that copy of that game
PlayStation,
is
shut
gone.
up. I mean, sorry, that's offensive for the live stream. Please,
All right.
Please keep your PlayStation opinions to yourself, James.
I had Xbox, and it crapped out on me, so I went to PlayStation.
Right. So they freaked out based on their view of
Yeah.
the world through the law.
And that's the thing, again, as we were kind of briefly discussing as a joke before we started. People a lot of times are like, man, I wish I lived back in the day,
Oh yeah.
I wish I lived at the time of, the emergence of man, or I wish I lived in the time of this, or I wish I lived in biblical time, or I wish I lived in... And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm good. We got Jesus, we got air conditioning, we got grace.
Antibiotics and Band-Aids.
You just want to go back to pre-cell phones? I can almost
Yeah, I'd
understand
be
that
okay
one.
with that.
But,
I remember pre-cell phone times. I don't want to go back there.
I don't either. I can understand where someone would want to, but no, I'm good.
Are you?
Yeah. I like my cancer-causing devices.
All right, so you can't talk about the letter of the law of the Sabbath without talking about
The law.
first Sabbath.
Yeah.
Well, you can't. Yeah, you have to talk about the law, but you also have to talk about the first Sabbath, the thing that they pointed to
Right.
in the law, or that God pointed to in the law, because the Sabbath is one of those laws that it's in the Ten Commandments where God specifically says,
Yeah.
da 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 da. Moses, da 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 da, and even inscribes it in stone himself. Okay,
Twice.
so if we turn to Genesis chapter 2, and we're going to go through verses 1 through 3, and then we'll discuss that for a while. Genesis 2, verse 1 through 3. So the heavens and the earth and everything in them were completed. On the seventh day, God had completed his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, for on it he rested from all his work of creation. Now, if we want to talk about another issue that people might run into with different versions of Bibles, some versions in Genesis chapter 2, verse 2 say, on the sixth day, God had completed his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. There are some manuscripts that say sixth day and then say seventh day, and other manuscripts that say seventh day both times. And
That's one of those semantic
both manuscripts are about the same age.
Yeah.
So
That's one of those semantic words. Like
It is. It's one of those semantic things where it's like,
what's the
yeah, but the
definition of
seventh
ended?
day he was completed, but he completed it on the sixth day. Isn't that the same thing? It's like, I need a half a dozen eggs. Oh, you want 6 eggs? No, I need half a dozen eggs. Okay. Hey, I'd like a cheeseburger without cheese. All right, 1 hamburger. No, I want a cheeseburger without cheese. Right, 1 hamburger coming right up. No, I said a cheeseburger without cheese. Yeah.
First off, if you're ordering a cheeseburger without cheese, you need your face punched. Just saying. That's a.
I was reading about.
That is not the opinion of the Ecclesian House. The logo's right here. That is the opinion of only Pastor Nooms. Let's be clear, not the Ecclesian House.
I was reading a thing earlier this week about unruly customers, and there was a guy who insisted he get a cheeseburger without cheese, fries, and a drink. And the poor guy serving him tried to explain, if I ring up a cheeseburger, it's going to charge you $1 more, whether I put the cheese on there or not, than if I ring up a hamburger. And the guy still insisted, I want a cheeseburger without cheese, not a hamburger. And, yeah, so, whatever, man.
You got to be some kind of special. I'm sorry.
I'm kind of
Flavor
special.
of cheese.
Okay, so, in talking about the Sabbath with a Muslim friend, the issue immediately came up where Muslims don't believe that God gets tired and needs rest.
Right.
But Christians don't either.
Well, smart ones don't.
Right. So the point just went right over, it just went right over his head
Yeah.
about the whole rest thing. But we don't believe that God gets tired. We don't believe God needs rest. We believe that God chose to rest. And if you need biblical reference for that belief, it's in Isaiah chapter 40. If I can find Isaiah, here we go. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 28. 40, 26, 27. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 28. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the whole earth. He never becomes faint or weary. There is no limit to his understanding. The Lord never becomes faint. He never becomes weary. He doesn't need to rest. He chose to rest.
Yeah. And that's
he chose to rest for a very good reason. Right?
Yeah.
To set an example.
Yeah, that's a very it's a very important point. I was having a conversation with someone on this about, and he's not a Christian. Someone who's not a Christian, and he was like, "I'm just gonna work 7 days a week and get through these bills real quick." And I went, "No, you're not." I said, "You need to take a day every 6 days. You need to take a Sabbath. 1, you need a day with your wife. 2, you need to rest." It's like Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is a great example of that. I know how much you love Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is a great example. They plainly say, everyone goes, well, they close because people go to church. But what about all the people who don't go to church? No, they plainly say in their rules, we are closed so that way to respect our people's families so they can have a day to spend time with family and friends and live their lives where they can't work. You can't call a manager in so they force everyone gets a day off. Store manager can't get called in literally unless, of course, if the building's on fire, the fire department's going to call. Blah, blah. There are extenuating circumstances, and they're not going to work the next day. Anyway, there are. Sorry, I'm too technical sometimes. Forgive me. But they close for that reason. It's not we're religious, so we do this. It's you need a day, even if you're not religious, because your body cannot sustain 7 days of work for a long period of time without collapse.
Not if you're going to live a long life. No,
it's been proven time and time again that it's harder on your body if you do not rest at least a little.
Yeah, if you want to burn out your physical body and die within 10 years, you're on track by working 7 days a week.
And it's not always just a physical body. It's a mental. Like, you look at the Japanese culture. We all know how they work. And there's a big shift right now because the newer generations, there's more access to the world media. And they're like, wait, you mean everyone isn't dropping dead at 30? Like, or living to 120 because they didn't have because old work and new work is different. But the menial office work, 7 days in a row, every day, 12 hours, blah, blah, blah. You can't sustain that. Kudos for trying as a whole country, but it don't work.
All right. I don't know what brought it up just now, but in my mind, I was reminded of Robert Morris. Pastor Robert Morris is very strict about his Sabbath day, and when he's pretty curt about it too. When he'll get an email on his Sabbath day and somebody will say, "I know it's your Sabbath, but if you could just real quick," he'll go, "Okay, and after I do that, which other commandment would you like me to break? Who would you like me to murder?"
Yeah. Like, it's one of those, if you have to start an email with, "I know, but," we're already done. Like,
yeah, you should have just waited until tomorrow.
You have lost, like, if you send an email because you forget it's my Sabbath, like, I get it. I'll look at your email tomorrow. No big deal.
Right.
You start it with, "I know it's Sunday. I know you're not working, but," something better be on fire. Like, literal fire. Not your idea of a fire. Something better to literally be on fire if you're calling me with an attitude of, "I know, but." Because I hate that. When we've both been in management, I know it's your day off, but yesterday we had some people over, and someone and they were like, "Well, I know you have a day off, but," and she's like, "I'm with this," and like showed my daughter and was like, "You need to leave me alone. Like, this is not, you are not important right now. Like, let's be clear." And I was like, "Ooh, they done made her mad."
That's funny. Oh, drop my pen.
But yeah, she was like, "I'm not answering your phone call. I'm off and hanging out with she says, my girls,
Yeah.
So, it was funny. They had a good day, though.
Good. All right. So I thought we could talk about some differing views on what is the Sabbath. Because there's a lot of legalism that goes on about
Mhm.
when you observe the Sabbath, right? So
I
the
personally
apostolic,
believe you have to follow the Sabbath from Friday night at 5:59 and 59 seconds to Saturday night at 5:59 and 59 seconds, and you cannot eliminate that even by a half second.
Well, if you-
Personally, is how
but-
I believe.
But wait, because you've told people that it's
Just-
from sunrise or sunset to sunrise.
Tina,
So that time
Tina.
doesn't count.
Tina, I'm being facetious.
I know that.
Well, let me be
I was-
facetious. Did you see the look on his face?
I know.
Let
But I'm
him.
just saying that even so, being facetious, that doesn't work with your logic. Because the sun sets at a different
So there are
time.
lots of varying opinions, Billiam. Would you like to share some other than my joking one from 6 to 6, which is what some people do believe, but
I think Tina's doing pretty good.
you just go sit back and relax while my wife yells at me? You know.
Right. So I was going to say the apostolic Sabbath that at least the American church follows is that Sunday, the first day of the calendar week, is the Sabbath. And church services are held and things like that. And historically, the reason that the apostolic church, which, you know, there was the Jewish temple and then there was the apostolic church, and then the apostolic church split to create the Catholic Church, and then the Catholic Church split to create the Roman Catholic Church and the Catholic Church, and then the original Catholic Church fizzled out, and the Roman Catholic Church took responsibility for the starting of the Catholic Church, and then when all of the apostles died, then the Roman Catholic Church took responsibility for starting the apostolic church. All my words are getting messed up now, but the reason they moved it from sundown on Friday night to sundown on Saturday night to the first day of the calendar week was because they were really, 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 really into this first fruits thing about offering the first and best of everything to God. And so the logic in their mind was, it's the first day of the calendar week, we're going to devote it to God, and we're already supposed to devote a Sabbath day of no work for our own good, so we're going to combine those two together and observe our Sabbath and our first fruit of our week at the same time and offer that to God as an offering. And that's kind of the logic there historically for why American churches, at least, the majority of churches, observe the Sabbath on Sundays. Now, there are some churches that are the Seventh-day Adventists, which the name itself doesn't make any sense. Their viewpoint is to have the Sabbath on the seventh day of the calendar week, but the Adventist part I don't really get, because you're not advancing anything, you're just having your Sabbath on the seventh day. And other than being, you know, fundamentally hyper-conservative, there's not really much differences between the Seventh-day Adventists that I've seen, that I know of, and the rest of mainstream modern American church. Yeah.
And then there are, you know, some people who do it on Monday. Monday is the day they do church and everything. Some people do Saturday. Some of your Orthodox, things like that.
Lots of views.
Yeah, lots of views on
Right.
when you're dealing with it from a legalistic standpoint. And I know we're trying to stay in that vein this week.
Yeah.
Which
This week.
makes me itch, because starting down a vein and not finishing a vein, as everyone who's ever watched any of our live stuff,
difficult.
is very hard for me.
Yeah.
So I'm trying real hard here.
let's play a legalistic what if game, okay? Are you with me?
I'm with you. I'm good at being
Okay.
legalistic. I did it for years.
So, God worked for 6 days.
Yep.
All right. On the sixth day,
Yep.
he created mankind.
Yep.
All right. On mankind's second day
Yep.
was the first Sabbath.
Yep.
So,
Shouldn't
is
it
the
be Monday?
Sabbath the second day of the week? Is the Sabbath the seventh day of the week? If
That-
we're going to get real legalistic about it,
Yep.
the first Sabbath was on the second human day,
And
not the seventh human day.
you start to get into that whole thing of what is the calendar? What is the old calendar? What is the new calendar? Are we doing?
Because our current Gregorian calendar isn't exactly the same as the Julian calendar before it, and that's not anywhere near to what the lunar calendar that the Jewish people were following before that
Yep. And what
or
some
the
cultures still
Augustan
follow
calendar
a lunar.
was different too. Yeah, some cultures still follow the lunar
Yeah.
calendar.
So the days are completely different.
Right. Exactly. Now, if we really, 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 really want to follow the letter of the law says, for 6 days you'll work, and the seventh day you'll rest. Okay? So legalistically speaking, if you were born on a Saturday, then every Saturday should be your Sabbath.
And then you deal with the legalism of what is work. We have to dig into that. We have to dig into the legalism of what is rest. What is, as someone who's a pastor, you, of course, can't have Sunday as your Sabbath. You work the whole time. I don't. I click a couple buttons at the beginning of this thing, and I click a couple buttons at the end.
And you open your mouth and share your opinions.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's not, for me, I don't classify it as work, because for me, it doesn't feel like work. It's not
Right.
labor. It's not, which I don't do labor to begin. Let's not get it twisted. I write documents, and make things pretty. Like, that's it. Like,
You're a data analyst. You don't do. You're a business analyst. You don't do work. You
No,
don't-
remember, I'm a product owner. I'm a product manager now.
Oh, that's right. You're a product manager now. Yeah.
I don't do manual labor, but that's beside the point. What I mean is, for
Well,
me,
I mean, this isn't manual labor. The church stuff isn't manual labor.
yeah, for me, it doesn't feel that way. Now, the other thing, legalistically, a 5-day work week doesn't make sense. If we want to deal with legalism, you want to start getting into some real legalistic stuff, you should be working 6 days and off
Days
one.
a week
If you are legalistic.
instead of the Ford work model.
Yep.
And they call it the Ford work model because all Americans used to work 6 days a week.
Yep.
And then have 1 day off a week. Well, that 1 day off a week was Sunday. But the law prohibited people from buying cars on Sunday because it was the Sabbath. So you couldn't buy car. You couldn't buy car and you couldn't buy alcohol on Sundays.
Yep.
So Henry Ford spent millions of dollars. And by millions of dollars, at the time that he spent that, we would now call that billions of
Yep.
dollars by comparison, lobbying to make a campaign to convince workers and indeed the government that people needed 2 days off every weekend so that everyone would have a day to be able, off of work, to be able to go buy cars.
Yep. And
that's why we have a
that's
2-day weekend.
legitimately the real reason. It's kind of like the old school, like why did people get vacation days? Well, and it's funny because it's a current movie that came out recently kind of talks about it a little bit, which is that Winnie the Pooh movie. I don't know if you've seen the live action Winnie the Pooh movie, but like
No,
one of the
that's-
things that he does is he's like, well, I rested. I was with my family. I was this. And the person's like, well, you can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And then he was like, no, listen to me. We sell luggage. The only way to sell more luggage is to give people more time off. We should be marketing the fact that everyone needs vacation time because they'll buy more luggage. And I'm sitting there going, And I guarantee that's actually the conversation in a boardroom somewhere that started this process. Like, I know they're making it into, like, him trying to flub through a meeting that he's in trouble in, but I guarantee that's how it worked at some point. Because everything, you look at the Michelin rating, the 5-star Michelin rating. Why is a tire company rating restaurants? Well, because they rated them so that way you traveled farther to go to a better restaurant. So you used your tires. Yeah. So because of that, you know, like you're saying, Ford changed the world. But if we're going to be legalistic, you shouldn't have that extra day off. Right. I am thoroughly enjoying a 5-day work week over the last 4 months.
Since like February, I think.
Yeah, the last 3 months. Because I've never had a 5-day work week. I've always worked 6, and then for a long time I worked 7. And it's super nice. I'm like, wow. Is this how some people feel? Like, these are what days off are? Like, I ain't got to stress out all day? So my Saturday is more, you know, get stuff done, housework, that kind of stuff. And then my Sunday is more like, when are people coming over? At what point does someone show up?
Another legalistic observation or question is this: if you're choosing to observe your Sabbath on Sunday, the day that you go to church, okay, and you're going to a live church service face to face in person. If you're an introvert,
that's work.
That's not Sabbath rest.
That's work.
That's work. If you're an extrovert, that's Sabbath rest.
Yeah.
That's even rejuvenation. But if you're an introvert, you just broke the Sabbath.
Think of it that way. Stop making me work on Sundays.
Wait, what?
Did you hear her?
So he's saying that, like,
I heard her.
Because for introverts, it's harder to, like, be in crowds and stuff. And like,
it's work to go to
people,
church.
like,
It's
I
hard.
don't like
Work.
small talk with people I don't know very well. And so it's just, it's stressful. I am. I'm a weirdo.
For me, as an introvert, I've always dreaded walking into church services because it is so draining.
Yeah.
It is so much work to get into that crowd of people. I mean, it is just exhausting. Just full on exhausting. Just to attend a church service in person. And it's not rest at all. It is straight up work.
Yeah.
And it also depends. Like James just mentioned, James is an introvert. He's kind of shy. He's quiet until you get to know him. And then once he feels comfortable, he's a switch. That's what he is. He's a switch.
That's normal. That's introvertedness.
Yeah.
He has a comfort zone.
Yep. And so once church became his comfort zone,
defines his introvertedness.
Yeah.
Right? And if he extends out of his comfort zone, then it's work. And once someone gets into that comfort zone, then that's the flip. And that's textbook introvertedness. It really is. And a lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand that intimacy is the key to overcoming introvertedness. Like, not as much of an introvert as I used to be, but still an introvert at my core, driving for Uber and Lyft. People will ask, well, how do you deal with having a stranger in the car? Well, it's only one stranger. That's easy. Because one stranger at a time is easy.
Yeah.
As an introvert.
It's a work for
within
you,
my comfort zone.
Yeah. For yours.
It's when we talk about crowds, that's when I'm out of my comfort zone all of a sudden.
I had to do an Uber, and it was like 4 people. I was just like,
yeah.
One person or 2 people was fine, but when there's like a full car, it's like,
Whereas me,
when there's 6 people sitting behind me chattering away, I'm like, oh.
yeah.
Whereas me, when I got into my Uber, I could tell some of the Uber drivers that I got into when I was in Oregon, they were introverts, and it was funny. Because me getting into a car with an introvert right off the bat, I am too much for most people right off the bat. Like, and
we hadn't have met on Teen Mania campus
while
I
gaming,
already felt comfortable, we wouldn't be friends.
No, because I am way too intense for some people.
We met in a place where I was in my comfort zone, and that's why we became friends.
But yeah.
Okay.
And we're at the 8 minutes from being done time.
Right, and we're on the end of my notes here too.
So now I can without actually doing it. Thank goodness that the legalism isn't all there is, and make sure to listen to the next podcast, as Pastor Bill has said, so that we can talk next week about the things that aren't part of legalism, because I spent so many years being extremely legalistic. Like, only one person in this room, meaning like in the room I'm in, including you, actually knew me when I was legalistic, and it was bad. I once called someone a biblical donkey hole because that was not breaking the rules. I was so legalistic. Like, it was bad. And finding freedom from the legalism in the area of this, I just didn't follow the Sabbath. I broke the commandment, knew I broke the commandment, and didn't care, because I worked in industries where you couldn't take Sundays off. So I was like, well, there goes another week of breaking a commandment. And like you mentioned as a joke earlier, it's like, and if I see someone, might murder them. Already breaking one today. Like, you know, and legalistically, it was so hard all the time. And I beat myself up every Sunday because that was my legalistic definition of it. But I had to do it. I had no choice as a manager and in retail, because Sunday was our busiest day. And no idea about all the wonderfulness of grace and spirit of the law that is, until I was much older. And then I really like the spirit of the law. I'm much better
because
with it.
as it says in the New Testament, I wish I had the verse and chapter and verse written down, but it is for freedom that Christ set us free. Christ didn't set us free so that we could become slaves again to the law.
Right.
Christ set us free so that we could live in freedom.
Yep.
And it is an act of worship and love that we then follow the teachings of Christ and don't go out and murder people. It's not because we are prohibited by the law from doing so. It is because we love God and we would not want to do those things that are outside of his idea of right and wrong.
Right.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we're good. I was going to talk about that guy that got stoned in Exodus 20, but I'm good.
Well, they have to listen to the podcast for that tidbit.
You skipped that and went right to the last thing I wrote in my notes was the law brings condemnation. And you just started talking about how you were condemning yourself and da-da-da-da-da because you weren't following the Sabbath, you know? And I was like, well, he just did my last note for me, so I guess I'm good.
Sometimes it works that way. That's why we're good together.
Right. So the podcast that just came out about 25 minutes ago is Sabbath Part 2. It's talking about not only the spirit of the law, not only the spirit of the Sabbath, but the importance of the Sabbath. Because observing a Sabbath is very, very, very important. And if you want to get a preview before you go listen to it, go read Hebrews chapter 3 and Hebrews chapter 4. Because those two chapters there, the author, who I personally believe is Paul, there's some debate on who wrote Hebrews because of certain things that it puts things, certain ways it puts things, but I personally believe it was Paul. The author, that's what he's talking about in Hebrews chapter 3 and Hebrews chapter 4, is the importance of Sabbath rest. And so it's very, very, very important. And so in this podcast, we're going to talk about that importance and the spirit of the law and why it's important to follow it spiritually instead of legalistically. And so I highly recommend you go and listen to the podcast. And then if you want to see my face and see me face to face while you're listening to it, the live video version of the podcast drops at 8 p.m. Central Time, right here, wherever you're watching right now, every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. The video version of the podcast releases live, just like you're watching live right now, only it's not actually live. It's pre-recorded, but it pushes live, you know.
Fake life.
Fake live. Faux live.
No.
Faux as in F-A-U-X?
No.
Faux live? Like faux fur?
No.
Your wife thought it was funny.
No, I laughed at his no.
Oh, you're lucky. You thought he was funny.
What,
Well, that's good. You should think
sweetheart?
your husband's funny.
We're still.
Okay, now we're doing the whole buffer thing for 30 seconds.
Right. So, I love you guys. Have a good week, and we'll see you next week. And now we're gonna buffer live for 30 seconds because whoa,
We're still live.
I hope the buffer cuts that off.
It's not going to. I'll make sure it doesn't.
That's the mother of my children, and she's gonna get away with that because it's Mother's Day. Could have been any other day of the year. She would hear it up one side and down the other for that, but it is Mother's Day.
She straight licked his face.
Oh.
Like, leaned into camera shot, licked his face, and leaned out.
Wow.
Like full on cow lick,
Like, she
big
feisty
ol'
today.
Him,
hot,
future
wet
nothing?
tongue. Like I bet all she can taste now is thieves' oil.
Alright, so that should be about our 30 seconds. So I'm going to hit the button, but then we'll stay on the call.